Hey, it's the Thursday edition of Husker247 Daily. I'm Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson over there, talking Nebraska, Maryland as the Huskers get ready to take their show on the road for the first time. True road game. We don't count. Kansas City doesn't count. That was like louder than a Memorial Stadium game at times. It felt like. Let's just get right into it. Brian, is Nebraska ready for the road? Like, is this show ready to hit the road?
Um, I think so. I think it helps that the fact that I don't expect it to be the most hostile environment. I do think the place might have been buzzing a bit had Maryland won last week, but the fact they blew that game as they did, giving up 21 in the fourth quarter, maybe takes a little juice away. I'm just sort of perusing, Maryland's message board and sort of like what their feel on the season is. I don't sense like that overwhelming energy, like for this game. And so I think that can help. Like if Nebraska, especially early, can sort of pile on what Washington did to Maryland in the fourth quarter, and you sort of take off with your first quarter being a representation of that, I think it could be tough for the Terps, and you could sort of take away or negate their home field advantage pretty quickly if you did that.
The folks in Maryland wondering who the next Steve Francis is going to be. Is that what the tone of the conversation is?
There is a little bit of that. I'm hesitant to always say that because I know they have people I'm sure love that football program too, and they've had some proud teams, but there is a dynamic of that probably is true.
What is there something about this team that feels like it'll be able to handle that kind of a game a little bit better? I mean, obviously it's tough to win on the road in the Big Ten. Nebraska's going today. Actually, they're going a day early to kind of get used to everything and with the trip there. But you kind of get a sense, I think, of teams that are just maybe a little bit more built for what happens, potentially in road games and how to handle the waves of things. Like, do you have that
Yeah.
sense with this team, or what
Well,
do
I
you
think
make of it?
Well, we got to learn, I guess. There's the old documentary Red Sox fans love 4 days in October. This could be 7 days in October because we're going to find out a lot. And within 2 weeks, from basically Saturday through the next Friday, people are going to be either over the moon about this Husker team or there's going to be some negativity. And so this is their chance to go on the road and make people over the moon about it. I think one thing that is to their benefit is Rule talked about it earlier in the week, Bruntz. They're very meticulous, like in their planning. Dr. Susan Elza and everybody involved with that, like where they're at, when they're going to be at certain places on the road. And I think they kind of make the road trips feel almost like at home. Like they bring all their nutrition stuff with them. It's the same type of meals and all that. And so I think that's useful in the fact that you're in a different area code, but there's a routine that is the same no matter where you're at.
They bring the chefs,
They
put them
do.
on the plane.
Yeah.
What a deal. Let's talk about the game itself. It always kind of feels like sometimes in these games, you kind of got to you get like a contribution from somebody that you're not really expecting, or somebody that's maybe a little bit under the radar. Who are you kind of looking at in this game that has the potential to be that kind of player? You can go both either side of the ball. Just kind of explore the studio space a little bit. But who are you watching closely in this game to potentially come up with a big play that swings the tide for Nebraska?
I'll give you one on defense, and then you can give me yours on that side of the ball. I'll say he's not new to the equation by any means, but Donovan Jones. I feel like Michigan State wanted to try to pick on DJ a little bit in that game. The win made it difficult to do so, but like early on, they threw like 3 or 4 his way. And when you look at the secondary, there's not a lot of weak links. And I'm not saying Donnie is, but he's the young guy. Guthrie, of course, is a young guy too. But I think he's someone that a team or an offensive coordinator on the other side will say, let's see what he's made of. Let's see what he can do. So I think this is a big game for him. And so how he plays against a team that does have some explosive playmakers. They have 2 guys who have more than 300 receiving yards, averaging 17 per catch. So there is a little bit of a strength on strength sort of component to it. I think Nebraska feels they can be stronger there, but it's going to require all 5 guys in the back end when they're out there to obviously be dialed in the way they have been so far.
I'll stick on defense, and this isn't like under the radar, but just based on kind of the career arc that he's had, I'm very eager to see what Javen Wright looks like after the game that he had against Michigan State. Like, we've talked for years about the athleticism and how he's just kind of built a little bit differently, and you saw it in that first possession where he hurdles a running back, goes in, and I think that play really kind of rattled Childs a little bit. Like, it kind of had the feeling of guys coming over the walls a little bit in the blitz. And I don't know that he just kind of seemed antsy in the pocket from that possession on. But Maryland's going to want to throw the ball. There's no secret there. He's going to have to be a factor in the pass rush and the blitz game, I think. But he's also going to have to cover a little bit. Maryland has really good tight ends. They've got good skill position players out on the edges. And, it feels like a guy that's really trending in the right direction. I'm curious to see what he can be in coverage as well as what he's done just in terms of tackling and being a part of the pass rush. So I feel like he's a guy that can have something to say in this game in trying to shut down that Maryland passing attack. Is there somebody on offense that you're thinking of as well?
Yeah.
Since we have the time.
Yeah, I mentioned on the Hypecast, Elijah Pritchett. I mean, it's his second start as a Husker at left tackle. He had the one missed assignment. Several guys had missed assignments, but he had one where it would have probably been a touchdown to Dane Key. At least Holgerson thought so, and Riola, and looking at it back. And so he played sort of well around that, but also had another flag at one point. And so I think he's had like 3 of them now this year. And so hopefully he can play a clean game. And you got to give Maryland their props. They have a couple of freshmen that they're playing older than that so far. And people can nitpick and say the schedule, this and that. They went on the road, and I know Wisconsin's offense is struggling, but Wisconsin scored a garbage touchdown late for basically their first points almost, whereas a 27-10 game. And I give credit to that. We would give credit to Nebraska if they went up to Madison and put that sort of defensive performance on somebody. So I'm not going to knock that in any way. And a thing to note from last week too, Bruntz, is I didn't realize it until like a day ago. Sidney Stewart, he's been one of their main TFL young guys, sack guys. And he got a targeting call in the second quarter of that game and was actually out in the second half. And that was a pretty big deal, I think, for them. So they're excited. It's in our Know the Foe feature, but they're excited to have him back. And as a Mathis on the other end is a pretty good player. So Nebraska's tackles got to be good. Everybody on that line, and the running backs got to be a little bit better at the pickup. But I'll Elijah Pritchett, just like this needs to be a solid game from him that he can kind of use as a foundation moving forward.
Is Dane Key, is he under the radar now?
Yeah, you could pick him. Is he your pick?
I think he's my pick. He had 3 for 36 against Michigan. He didn't have a catch last week against Michigan State. Blocked well on the perimeter. There was one of Emmett's touchdowns. He kind of set it up with a nice block on the perimeter. But they got to find a way to get him going. And I go back to what Dana Holgerson said this week of, a guy kind of he calls plays and pushes plays to guys that kind of seemingly have the hot hand. And they did that with Isaiah Hunter last week, found ways to get him the ball. I'm eager to see if they find ways to get Dane Key going in this game a little bit, because he's been quiet. And, Maryland's defense, as good as they've been, rushing the passer, they'll give up some pass yards. And I think Dane Key needs to kind of have that splash play that Isaiah Hunter had last week against Michigan State. If he keeps both shoes on, great. But I do think that's a guy that Nebraska needs to find a way to get going a little bit, to add another layer to this offense going into a really key stretch where, you're playing a couple teams where a big play or two could really swing things in your favor.
Yeah, that's one of the tough parts about being an OC is I'm not saying anyone is being a bad soldier over there by any means, but you probably do feel a responsibility that you have mouths to feed, so to speak, like to get certain guys the ball. And obviously, I asked Holgerson about, he said Dane Key played his best game actually because he was of his blocking and stuff like that. But he wants to make an impact in the receiving game. So I think that's a great one to bring up. And you'd almost expect that they go to him early, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I think they got to get him going. So we'll get going here. Nebraska's on their way to Maryland later today. Terrapins on Saturday at 2:30 Central. Keep it locked on Husker 24/7 for everything leading up to the game.